take like a program like iPhoto.
So I was really honored and privileged, I felt, to be able to go to Paris for the climate talks. And I went with dear friends and met many new friends, and I'm going to share a bit about my experience later in the evening. But I asked for Moose to actually open up with a poem. He's one of my favorite writers, and not only that, I heard some of the work that he was scribbling in his notebook as we were walking the streets of Paris together. He wasn't doing that while we were walking, but he did it a lot. So, Moose Jackson.
Probably going to be talking about a lot of stuff that's on the drier and heavier side of things maybe tonight. So, if you guys like something a little lighter and fun. You see everybody here that's in New Orleans has lived here for a minute? No? Okay, I won't do this one then.
We got one that just arrived today.
Okay.
Today.
This one makes sense. It's called The Wailing is Essential. It was a crescent moon Monday night, 11:04 to be precise, when I left the house to glide like shadow down hollow streets, still hearkening to blues time. Ancestral rhythms, native tongues. I was hunting the itch I've always known, where kids net leaves from saxophones, where beatified yaks prayed to bottles of bud. That realize once you're in there, the wailing is essential, as is the smoke, thick as brew, a pot of good red beans and rockabilly hairdos declaiming the buxom and garrulous beauty of our hard-working dudes and darlings. Never mind, we are mostly immigrants from a country less kind, plied by oozing to loosen the knees, and whatever was once good about America blooms anew as the room fills with dirty dancing. It was only last night, some 40 years ago, when the mood was exactly right. Hell, Sam Cooke would sure know, and we were wide awake dreaming. You pulled close, and what was broken in us found healing in the fighting of wolves. It was that close, yes. We cut some notches in our leather belts for every lost milepost of soul, knowing that some hungry nothing is hunting our sanctuary and muscling into the ragged dignity of our crepuscular bohemian paradise. It was only for a moment anyway, though we meant it for eternity. We didn't know, we should have guessed, that languid southern atmosphere was only the storm god holding his breath. We should have known, felt in our bones, how many would dance in dark waters. Yet, the wailing is essential, as is the flying bee that bites and gives warning. The Iceman is coming soon, so put your funky butts on the floor and shake that thing for a pork chop. Abandon yourself to it. By the time you get out, the knowing of this place will have set up shop inside you. Whatever meaning is left is in the rolling piano, in the shaking of the floor, is a blue neon light you must carry well into the pie and pie. God will want an accounting of this night. You roll up your sleeves, tell them, mister, wherever we finally go, the wailing will still be essential.
A little excerpt from some of the COP21 work. Happy Randall and Sean LaRocca have agreed to share another poem with us. Yes. It's a poem, it's a song, story. We have, and there's one, so COP21 came out of a trilogy, is the third in a trilogy of work about our disappearing coastline. And the first piece was out at a studio in the woods called Beneath the Strata Disappearing.
And the second piece was written by Raymond English Jackson called Read. And then the third piece is COP21. And John Green was our coyote who took the show on the road. So there's a lot of COP21 people in the house. But this piece is actually based on a poem that Jessica Henriksen wrote. Jessica is another New Orleanian poet who was inspired by the ship going through here. And so these are her words in response to the idea of crying. Out here, you never know who's praying. This air like a church invisible. All meadows swing their spindly crowns. Iris is born, hoping to be saved among the many. Sometimes it's just a heron blinking way up there on a bald cypress branch. The sky is wide-eyed, come down a little closer. This is a story of prayer. This is what weeping looks like in the bayou's full mirror. This is the story of the wing-eyed come down to cry. This is the story of the wing-eyed come down to cry. This is the story of the wing-eyed come down to cry you up, cry you up, cry you up, cry you up, cry you up. Answers in your dreams, the answer is in your dreams. Not from magic and solve, Lord, the answer is in your dreams. The answer is in your dreams, the answer is in your dreams. Not from magic and solve, Lord, the answer is in your dreams.
There were people from the Delta who went all the way to Paris to experience what was going to happen there. And there are three of us here. Did anybody else in the room go to Paris besides the three? Oh, Bennett was there too. My friend Bennett Collins came all the way from Scotland. I think he was in London yesterday morning. Said he was coming to this, and I said, really? And he said, yes. He's here for 6 weeks and put on this really amazing Doctrine to Declaration workshop that I participated in this past summer. And so he and I have been going back and forth because in being in Paris, having my experience in DC this summer, and then going to Paris and experiencing what I experienced there, I keep thinking about how the Doctrine to Discovery, which is this 500-year-old papal law that is horrible and what all international policy is based upon, is really the reason why we're going to be, or the feds are going to be auctioning off 43 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico next month. So thank you guys for being here so far. I think we'll start with you, Jonathan, since your images are all pulled up. Are you
Kind of, sort of.
going?
We're trying to figure out how to get them into a slideshow. If you know, I don't use Mac, so
Sure.
we've got them open. But
You got them open?
mhm.
They're all open.
Well, the file is open.
We can just go into Keynote here, I think. There's Keynote. Oh, here, we can just view slideshow. Right? They're all in, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Scott and I couldn't figure it out.
You guys, and so then you can control it there.
Yeah.
right? Or you can
Yeah.
control it with the keyboard.
Okay.
Is that where you want to start?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I was
Okay.
just gonna talk and let these run.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool. Perfect.
And then, I don't know, if you don't mind, I'm gonna transition into Paris. Can you open up the Paris set? Okay. You want me to come up there?
Wherever you feel comfortable, I think we set it up so we can all kind of see each other, but
I'll the theater.
get in front then.
All right, well, hello, everybody. My
Like
name
that.
is Jonathan Henderson, and I don't have exact guidelines on what to talk about, so I'll just basically talk about my experience and what motivated me to go to Paris in December. So I was born and raised in New Orleans, and grew up, fishing and canoeing in Louisiana's wetlands and visiting family in coastal Mississippi and going to spring break in Florida, Destin and Pensacola. So I'm pretty much a child of the Gulf of Mexico region. And I was in law school at Southern University. Actually, I have this emblem that I got from the HBCU delegation that I ran into in Paris, and they made me an honorary member, so I thought I'd wear that tonight. But, when Katrina hit, in 2005, I was at Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, and I was working for a state representative, so I had security clearance to get into the city. And I spent a lot of time, bringing in supplies and baby formula, water, diapers, that kind of stuff, but also boats. And I spent a lot of time floating around neighborhoods that I'd been in 1,000 times throughout my life, listening for voices trapped in attics, and watching police officers and first responders tie bodies to telephone poles so they would remember where they were. So that, obviously, like any of us that went through that experience, was very traumatic and changed my life. And it put me into, I guess, the trajectory now that I'm in. I realized, even though I come from a progressive background, my father was a pretty well-known, infamous, if you will, progressive lobbyist in New Orleans. So, I kind of cut my teeth with him. Russell Henderson was his name. But even though with that influence, I still didn't know that I was going to go into the environmental field. But after Katrina, I was working at a firm here in New Orleans, and I was just not happy. I realized that I needed to do something to get into this fight. I learned a lot about what the causes of our wetlands loss are. And the thing that really bothered me the most is that the oil and gas industry has caused so much damage to our coast and hasn't been held accountable. So in the summer of 2008, I decided to take a job canvassing with the Gulf Restoration Network. And I spent the whole summer going door to door with everybody else. And then at the end of that summer, I got hired on by GRN full-time as a climate organizer for what was then the One Sky campaign, which has since merged with 350. And so for the first 2008, 2009 through the first week of April, that was my job, was representing the One Sky campaign. That was a climate campaign with the focus on getting federal policy passed to address climate change, advocating for green jobs and reducing carbon emissions down to levels that science says is necessary. And then the One Sky campaign went away after some key legislation either passed or failed. I stayed on with the Gulf Restoration Network, was transitioning into a new role, which hadn't been clearly defined. And then the BP, Deepwater Horizon, Transocean's Deepwater Horizon rig exploded and sank in the Gulf of Mexico. And so in a way, it was personally, the timing was conducive for me to fully focus on being out in the field and documenting the impacts, because I didn't have a whole, a set work plan on what I was supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. So just a few days after the Deepwater Horizon sank, I was in a plane flying over it, and I was all I had was a little flip cam to take photos with, and throughout all of 2010, several days a week, I was either on a boat or a plane, documenting the oil as it spread all throughout the Gulf Coast, both from the air and in boats, in our wetlands, in the bays and estuaries that were really hard hit. Remind you guys how hard it was, but something that I pursued as a career. I did take a photography class in high school at Ben Franklin, and I was just telling somebody today that it's odd, but I won an award and I had photos displayed at the CAC, and then I never picked up the camera really again until 2010, with the exception of taking photos on trips here and there. But just, and then at the end of 2010, I started noticing as I kind of developed a skill to detect oil leaks, learning from some of the best scientists and researchers and pilots around that I had the privilege of flying with and being out in the field with. I started to get a sense of how bad the pollution problems are in coastal Louisiana and in the Gulf and wherever the extractive industry is here. So I added on to sort of my watchdogging in the field, documenting, searching for, finding, and reporting to the federal government and Coast Guard other leaks and spills that aren't related to the BP disaster. So fast forward to today, I continue to do that, but anybody who's been organized and doing environmental activism in the Gulf just knows how hard it is. We're really in the belly of the beast, and we have obviously the strongest industry, and they've hijacked our democracy, taken over our regulatory agencies. So it's just really hard work. People are afraid to speak out against the industry. And so with Paris, and if you want to switch to Paris, when I should say at the end of September, I left the Gulf Restoration Network and started a new endeavor called Vanishing Earth. And it's very much piggybacking off the work that I've been doing, but adding environmental journalism and investigative work to that. So, but the opportunity to Paris came up for me really the first day of December. I didn't know, I knew that I wanted to go. And then a sponsor came through, and so I bought a ticket that day and I went. And for me, it was a very emotional experience. There were some emotional needs that I had. I just really wanted to be surrounded by people from all over the world who were going through the same thing and witnessing the same things that I have been. Because I know Scott can attest to this, and we're kind of living in a parallel universe. I mean, we're dealing with a crisis every day, and but people in our everyday lives have no idea that what kind of impact, what kind of focus, what kind of hard work it takes to really stay trained on these issues. And so I'm really glad that I went to Paris. It was a very powerful experience. And I had the opportunity to meet environmental organizers from all over the world. I'm still in contact and in communication with people, and we're actually working together to coordinate a big action here in New Orleans that Anne just walked in, and she's got some flyers to talk about it. But there was a lot of momentum that came out of that came out of Paris that I sensed that, and particularly here in the Gulf region that wasn't, before. And so, I kind of view a lot of the organizing that's going on right now as in coordination, in unity with the struggles that are going on all over the planet. And there are a lot of countries that really didn't contribute to the problem, but are facing the consequences. And one of the ironies to me, and I'm kind of going to finish with this, you can read an op-ed that I wrote in the Lens a few weeks ago, but that touches on this. One of the ironies to me is that in Louisiana, I mean, we're in arguably the most well-off country in the world. Louisiana is a member of the Union, but we have communities here that are suffering the same consequences as other countries around the world. But the catch-22 for us is that if we're going to, as it stands right now, we have a coastal master plan that's unfunded. It's theoretically a $50 billion plan, but it's more like $100 billion over time, and no more than $14 billion, I believe, has been spent on the plan so far, and most of that is spent on the hurricane protection system for New Orleans, which hasn't been tested. I mean, Hurricane Isaac is the only hurricane that New Orleans has been hit with yet, and that was barely a category 1 by the time it got up here. So it remains to be seen. And meanwhile, we're losing, a football field of wetlands every 45 minutes, and the situation is slowly starting to take shape. The plan is, we see restoration projects happening, but we're also losing, an equitable amount of land. But so the irony, though, is that our future, our very future here, is inextricably tied now to more offshore drilling. The GOMESA program is set up to start delivering more revenues to Louisiana to help fund the Coastal Master Plan through offshore royalties. But that means that if the state is going to get that money, that we have to drill more in the Gulf of Mexico, which is going to cause more carbon emissions to be released, and kind of defeats the purpose. If you ask me, and that's my opinion. That's the opinion that I wrote in that op-ed. That it's an absurd system that we're in, and it's got to change. It's climate injustice to tie the future of Ile-de-Jean Charles or Dulat or Homa, and yes, even in New Orleans and so many other communities to more extractive fossil fuel drilling. And so I've taken some heat for that opinion by environmentalists and obviously the oil and gas industry. But I really don't care, because at the end of the day, I've put forth myself and my life and my happiness and everything else that matters into this fight. And I feel pretty optimistic with the people behind us, especially with this global movement that's happening, that we're going to win. So anyway, with that, I guess I'll get back to.
Thank you, Jonathan. I love seeing all these images. I was part of a media team too, but all of my equipment crapped out on me, which I was like, okay, I think this is divine intervention. I'm supposed to be doing something else, which is fine. It's really great to see all of this. So next, Imani. Jacqueline Brown is an amazing cultural activist and artist here in New Orleans. She is one of the founding members of Lights Out, which maybe she'll share a little bit about Lights Out with us as well. And she had a very different experience in Paris, so I'm excited to hear about it.
No. So forgive me for not having any images. It's been like a hectic few days, and I haven't actually consolidated all the various materials from Paris yet, because it's been a hectic couple of months. But yeah, I had a really very different experience in Paris, and I also wasn't taking that many photographs. So my name is Imani. I am a native of New Orleans. I also went to Ben Franklin High School, where I was an organizer. I was the president of the Green Society there, and was really involved with the anti-rocket movement. I was a senior in high school when Katrina hit, after which point I went to the East Coast and then went into college in New York. I was very privileged to have been in New York when Occupy Wall Street happened. And so that was a transformative experience, and I was very deeply involved, particularly in two working groups, because, you know about Occupy Wall Street, Occupy was sort of an umbrella coalition in which there were all of these different working groups that touched upon different issues within the larger system of capitalism that we knew we had to tackle. So whether it's the environment, whether it's LGBT rights, the rights of people of color, issues around mutual aid societies, et cetera. There are different groups of people who were focusing. So I was working very closely with Environmental Solidarity and the Arts and Culture Working Group. The Arts and Culture Working Group eventually broke out into a lot of different sub-working groups, including a group called Occupy Museum, with whom I'm still very involved. And Occupy Museum sees the problem of capitalism not as a purely political or economic problem, but as a cultural problem, that all of our values are now being funneled through the ability to make a profit, regardless of the outcome. We have to have a major cultural shift in order to address this system. In order to have a major cultural shift, well, we have to address our cultural institutions. So Occupy Museums was a group of people involved in various ways in the arts and culture sector. Artists, arts administrators. I was an arts administrator at the time. And we recognize that, first of all, we're all complicit, right, in the perpetuation of capitalism, the perpetuation of injustices, whether they be environmental injustice. I feel like no one here can say that they don't ever drink out of a plastic bottle. We're all complicit, and we have to recognize that and actively acknowledge that and work against it, both in our daily lives as well as looking toward broader cultural shifts. So within the cultural sector, we weren't looking specifically at only environmental issues, but we were talking about the ways in which the museums, our educational institutions, etc., are complicit in financial Ponzi schemes that erode the value of culture. We see arts and culture as a way of actually coming together as a society, of evolving together, of addressing societal issues, healing together. And when art becomes an asset class for speculation, you lose all of that, you lose those possibilities. And we said that arts and cultural institutions really needed to be dedicated to serving the missions that are laid out, to serving the public and the public interest. And when they serve as PR platforms for people like the Koch brothers, for companies like Shell, which is the backer now of the Jazz and Heritage Festival, when you take money from Hellas Foundation, which is actively trying to frack St. Tammany Parish right now, you have to recognize that you're also supporting their ability to whitewash their image, and that they see you, they're not funding you, or they're not supporting you because they really believe in the art, or even if they do, that's not even the point. You're an opportunity for them to clear their name, and to say, well, despite all this, we're doing this good work, but we're supporting the arts. So we started, Occupy Museums really started initially with these direct actions and holding general assemblies inside cultural institutions, calling them out for various labor abuses. For example, Sotheby's Auction House, the year that the CEO made $6.4 million in personal income, the company decided to eliminate their unionized art handlers, and they didn't want to pay them benefits anymore. So we stood in solidarity with them, and we did direct action within one of their evening contemporary art sales. We would go to the MoMA and hold general assemblies, calling them out for their continued use of Sotheby's. We would call out art fairs for coming to the city, New York, and not using unionized labor, for commodifying culture, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, started to actually get invited by various institutions, like small galleries, who would ask us to come and do projects where we would actually be sort of embedded journalists, artists, or source investigating the way that the private philanthropy sector was using art as a way of hiding some of the unsavory practices that their corporate end was doing. So within this network, this Occupy network, there were a lot of different groups, including a group called Not an Alternative. And they initially, were creating art in order to sort of visualize the interconnectivity of all the various Occupy Wall Street, factions. So the signature, if you've seen images of Occupy, you've probably seen the yellow and black police tape that says Occupy. If you've seen any images of Occupy Sandy, which was the hurricane relief effort that came out of the Occupy movement after Hurricane Sandy, you probably saw different wayfinding signs, again, this yellow and black. So trying to create visual imagery to show that even though we're all working independently, we're also all interconnected. Not Alternative recently started a project called the Natural History Museum. And they are, coming from this position of recognizing that Koch Industries, along with other corporations, have undue influence on natural history museums around the country, and also universities that are actually shifting the curriculum at different universities based on their own interests. The Koch brothers used to, up until a couple of weeks ago, thanks in large part to this group, Not an Alternative, used to sit on the board of the American Museum of Natural History in New York. In 2013, 14, they contributed, or David Koch in particular, contributed $65 million to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the largest museum in the city of New York. And as a result, they were able to buy out the public plaza. That same year, Bloomberg just happened to change the grounds for this formerly public land and turn it into privately owned land. So it was always public land. And David Koch got his name engraved in gold on the side of the plaza. So we all came together and did this major action, 5-hour-long intentional ritual, calling out the Metropolitan Museum for being in bed with the Koch brothers, and just really mourning sort of the abuse and the desecration of this cultural site for the sake of these funders. So Not an Alternative is the group that pulled together an international coalition of people to converge on the Paris climate talks last December. So I was invited as both a resident of a frontline community to an oil disaster, and as a member of Occupy Museums. We also brought together a group called Gulf Labor, who are calling out NYU, the Louvre, and other cultural institutions for building new satellite sites on Saadiyat Island in Abu Dhabi, where one worker dies a day because of unsafe labor practices. And they also operate within the cultural sphere in order to call out the institutions and ourselves for being complicit in these deaths. We brought together a group called Liberate Tape, which is a really amazing group of artists, activists based in London, who came together after Deepwater Horizon because many cultural institutions within the UK are funded by BP. And they said that we will no longer allow BP in the last 6 years have been involved in a very strategic, direct campaign, putting constant pressure on the tape modern and other tape museums within Britain. So they will go and do these very performative actions where they found this really amazing, if you use molasses and dilute it with a little like canola oil and water, you create this oil-like substance that looks very uncannily like just crude. So they'll pour it over their bodies and do actions within the gallery. They did an amazing action right before the Paris climate talks, where they brought together individuals and tattooed the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at the time of that individual's birth. And so went into a gallery space in the Tate Modern and gave each other tattoos of this number in there. So just constantly keeping this pressure on it. There's another group called BP or Not BP that formed after the Great Tate to take that same conversation into the theater sector. And we were also joined by people from Brazil, by organizers from Norway, native French citizens, and we came together on the occasion of the climate talks, specifically to first of all recognize that there is an incredible synchronicity between all of our actions and all of our strategies, and that we needed to recognize that we are all already operating somewhat collaboratively, albeit not intentionally, and that we needed to work together more intentionally, internationally, and find opportunities for us to partner on our local struggles. So we spent about 3 days sort of learning about each other's work. We had all heard of each other, but didn't know each other, and sharing each other's work, identifying timelines for when there were different actions already scheduled, and then when there were possibilities for future collaborations. And then we set about organizing an action at the Musée du Louvre, which is the largest museum in the world, is hoarding lots of stolen objects, like ritual, cultural objects stolen by colonizers around the world, and also supported by Total and any two oil companies. Total's name is actually, if y'all have seen the Louvre, there are these glass pyramidal structures, architectural structures in the vast courtyard designed by an artist named IMK. And Total has actually engraved their name in the glass structure that sort of forms the roof over the underground component of the Louvre. So that's very troubling, because then you start thinking, well, damn, it's not even that simple. We can't even just kick these funders out. We actually have to tear the whole shit down at this point. So we planned this action where we would actually enter the Louvre, and a group of people agreed to, who were willing to be arrested that day, to take this oil concoction, dump it onto the floor, the marble, gorgeous floor of the Louvre, take off their shoes, step in it, and form a procession throughout the atrium while singing Total Eni out of the Louvre, blah, blah, blah. It was really interesting because right after I got invited to go to Paris, the attacks happened, and there was a moratorium on all protests. Thankfully, as we've seen some images, climate activists, were not having any of it. They sort of saw through this as an opportunity, a convenient opportunity for the police state to say, oh, it's not the right time for y'all to come out and protest, right? We know that they've been trying to stop climate protests on any occasion. So people said, this is too much of a pressing issue, we're gonna do it anyway. But the police state was really cracking down throughout Paris at this time. So we were a little unsure about whether this was gonna, whether we were gonna be able to pull it off. It seems that there was some sort of actual infiltration because they knew that we were coming. And as I was trying to enter the museum, a few of us who had been really deeply involved in one sector of the organizing, all the people who were trying to get in the museum who were from that sector were identified and pulled aside. So as I tried to go inside, I was actually stopped at the security perimeter and then escorted to the periphery of the Louvre, and was really paranoid, oh my god, how did they know who we were? But some folk who were not deeply involved in those longer 3-day conversations were able to get in, and the action happened. They were arrested, and initially were facing charges of desecration of a national heritage site, which would have been a really big deal. But the Paris police were actually, initially they thought it was oil. But then when they started to like test it, they're like, wait, what is this? And they're like, it's molasses. And they're like, what? And they're like, it's sugar water. So everyone was like, oh, okay, like why are you in jail right now? And everyone got out and they were like kind of, it's like a tap on the wrist, like, oh, you can't spill anything on the floor of a museum for the next 30 days. You know, it's interesting because, you know, as we were planning this action, you know, everyone kept saying, you know, people really come out and protest in France. You know, people set cars on fire regularly. So they're not going to be that worried about like a little spill on the floor. And thankfully that turned out to be the case for the people who were arrested. There were two incredible activists who actually smuggled their phone into jail with them in their armpit. I was like, girl, like, where did you, they didn't make you like squat and cough? Like, how did you get it? It's like, no, in your armpit. And they filmed the message from jail, basically declaring, announcing the, you know, commencement of this new international global movement called fossil-free culture. So when I was when we were having this whole powwow about like, what are opportunities for collaboration, you know, people are very interested in coming here and doing solidarity work. Either both coming here and doing large grand scale actions, but also doing mirrored actions from their home countries. One thing that, you know, I brought up as a possibility is that there is an environmental justice conference next spring at Tulane, and that might be a really great opportunity to do some massive, you know, international scale action. So something to definitely think about. Another opportunity, and this is something that I haven't yet broached the subject with the people who are most directly involved, but there is some muttering amongst musicians that, you know, who have been very unhappy about labor practices at the Jazz and Heritage Festival for years now, that, you know, we could ask them if they would be willing to add to their list of grievances the sponsorship of Jazz Fest by Shell, which would create an opportunity for that struggle, their struggle around like Jazz and Heritage Festival in general, to then be amplified internationally. So I'm very interested in figuring out like how we can maximize this incredible network of people. There are also folks from 350.org. They have a list of like all of the foundations that have already divested from oil, so they have access to like that money pool. So there's a lot of juicy stuff there that I'm really, you know, curious and brainstorming about how we can mobilize these folk here. So yeah. Oh, lights out.
Yeah, please. Before you go.
Don't
go anywhere, because I hope we're going to have a Q&A.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool.
So Lights Out is an initiative that brings together citizens first, because we're all citizens first, artists, architects, urban planners, and now we're getting like policy like experts in the mix, and there are like some people who are like working within government who are now interested essentially in creating a new model for neighborhood development that is crowdsourced, that is led by the local native residents of a neighborhood, by and for, and that is specifically anchored within the community land trust model, which is a model of land ownership whereby the residents of a neighborhood all sit on the board of a nonprofit, so you don't pay property tax. And any building, whether it's a commercial property or a single family home or a multi-family home, that property can be owned by like an individual family, and they can, you know, pass it down from generation to generation, live there in perpetuity. But they have decided to sell the property, it goes back to the land trust. And the land owned by the land trust is kept always below market value, it's kept steady. So land is what always appreciates in value. Structures actually depreciate. So if you keep land at a steady value, then as, you know, development occurs within the neighborhood, that property always stays affordable. So we call it permanently affordable property. Any affordable housing that you hear about here in the city is only affordable for 15 years until the affordable housing tax credits expire and they're able to put it back on the market. So we're basically, you know, using, you know, a bunch of different
creative strategies inspired by the Social Aid and Pleasure Club, which is like the original New Orleans Mutual Aid Society, to rally people to be re-inspired to engage in the civic process and just reclaim our agency over our land and our neighborhoods.
I forgot I was the next speaker. I'm going to share just a little video of Scott Eustace.
No.
Let's see here. And I too, I'm in the same boat as far as feeling like I haven't caught my breath ever since Paris. It really, as both Amani and Jonathan said, it kind of like flipped my world upside down. And now I'm an organizer with this March 23rd action that we're going to be talking about more. And I can't find my bookmark. Where is it? Okay, so I will just, maybe I'll just wing it and not share. Let's see. So we're recording right now, and I'm sure I look like a fool on the footage. Okay, here we go. I know, guys. This is my life right now. Like I can't keep up. I hid the desktop in one folder because it was like I had thrown up on it. So.
This.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. So I was running with this crew, the Indigenous Environmental Network, and this is the morning of D12 where we had ceremony at the Notre Dame, and then we walked to the Love Bridge where we set out this red line. Of course, I don't need to I'll just let it go and then I'll finish. Yeah, so I'm gonna just put in this thing. I don't know how to do this. I feel silly. So, I'm Homa. My father's people are from Terrebonne Parish, but my grandparents moved to St. Bernard Parish in the 40s. I know a lot of you, so a lot of you know my story. I have a film called My Louisiana Love, which is a documentary that kind of puts a lens or puts a parentheses around the last 100 years here in the Mississippi Delta, and through a multi-generational story. So I went, because I was at a conference here in New Orleans that I was invited to, and actually is when I met Bennett. Social studies, social studies. I said, yeah, something like that. So I often get requests to speak at things, and I would sometimes say yeah, and sometimes say no. And that time I was like, okay. But I went with two of my mentors, Brenda Dardar Robichaud, who's the past consul chief of the United Combination, and my cousin Clarice Frulou, who has been fighting oil and gas for a long time. She lives in a community called Grand Bois, which is just south of Homa. And there are these open air waste pits that are there, football fields, full of all this nasty stuff. And now they're actually building a mountain in Grand Bois from what they're treating in these ponds, and it's treated. It has non-hazardous characteristics, or it has hazardous characteristics, but it's not hazardous or something. It's Louisiana's classic loophole, right? And so they're just stacking it. Like, yeah. And actually thousands of people pass on the Grand Bois La Rose Highway a day because it is the shortcut to Port Fourchon, which I don't know how many people know, but Port Fourchon is our major oil hub for the Gulf of Mexico, down by Grand Isle. So I go to this conference, and these two ladies look at me and they say, "We're going to Paris," and I'm like, "Okay, me too." And then we met Bennett, and so the gears started turning. I figured it out. Bought my plane ticket. I was ready to go, and then the ladies couldn't go because family responsibilities, people being sick, what have you. I was already committed, and Brenda connected me to the Indigenous Environmental Network, specifically to Dallas Goldtooth, who's singing in that reel that we just watched. So Dallas's father, just to kind of frame what the Indigenous Environmental Network is, it came out of the American Indian movement, and Tom Goldtooth, Dallas's father, has been fighting for a long time in Indian country for environmental justice. And so, they're old dogs. They've gone to like every one of these conferences all over the world and have an incredible international network of Indigenous people that they've been working with. Dallas called me, and he totally hooked me. He was like, "We're gonna have a flotilla of all of these canoes from all over, the world, and we're gonna do this action, and then we're gonna, And I'm just like, okay, I'm fine. I'm in. I'm just gonna go for a week. And I was like, no, I'm going from start to finish. And I ended up going actually for 3 weeks because my French host, who I'm really ashamed of myself because I didn't invite her tonight because I've been so crazy, but this incredible woman who lives part-time here, Marie-Françoise Cruch, some of you may know her, she's an amazing woman, but she said, no, Monique, you're coming to France, I have to show you the real France. And so I'm like, okay. So she took me out to the countryside for the first week where I showed the film in really small little mountain towns that, they were called dying towns because our small towns are dying, So I shared there. I spoke to elementary school students. They were the hardest people I've ever talked to too, because they were just straight up. We didn't even speak the same language. I'm in there for a minute. And they're like, "So you got any hope?" And there was this, so the mayor of this little town called Menas, he was really awesome. We shared the film, and the next day he took his whole day off and he just toured us all around this little town. And he brought me to the elementary school, and he kept reciting, which is a story that is in a lot of different cultures, but the story of the hummingbird. So the hummingbird, the forest is on fire, and the hummingbird goes, and he gets a little drop of water, and he puts it on the fire, and he gets a little drop of water, and puts it on the fire. The first night that I spoke, after I spoke, he shared the story, and he said, "Monique, you're like the hummingbird story." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, because
hummingbird through the water, put it on, and all the big animals in the forest are like, what are you doing? And the hummingbird's like, well, I'm doing my part, you know, which I thought, oh, that's really great. You know, it was a good thing to share with the kids, especially when they're asking the hard questions. I was like, well, you just have to be like the hummingbird, you know. And then I went to go see this new film, which some of you may have seen. Naomi Klein just came out with This Changes Everything. And right before the film, I sat down next to this French filmmaker, and he was telling me, and I'm totally spacing on, Imani, you might know, there was like 20,000, well, there was a bunch of bikers that biked all around France, and they would have like 20,000 people at these rallies and come through town. It was just like unbelievable, and I'm totally forgetting the name of it right now. But I'm sitting with him, and he had been watching and documenting what was happening and how people were really like coming out in numbers. You know, it wasn't like 500 people, it was like 5,000, you know, and always like big numbers. And I told him about my hummingbird thing. And he was like, yeah, because there's some sort of like hummingbird society in France or whatever, and that's their philosophy. He was like, but I think that's a bunch of shit, because we all need to work together. And it really like hit me where I was like, oh, I was holding on to this hummingbird story. I was like, but you were so right. It sucks being alone. So I went back to Paris, and I went out to the conference, which Jonathan had some shots of where Le Bourget was, where they were actually having these talks. And so, you know, you were either the blue zone or the green zone. If you were in the blue zone, you had the special pass. If you were in the green zone, you didn't. And then I'm like surrounded by all of these indigenous people from all over the world. I mean, Sami, Maori, Inuit ladies from Alaska, Pacific Islanders, these badass women from the Amazon, the Sarayaku. It was just like, kind of blew my mind. And I think that was one of the most powerful parts of my entire experience, was that, you know, and at Le Bourget, we were all under the same group, but I found myself we kind of moved as a pack. You know, the Indigenous Environmental Network would really support each other, and I was also doing media, so I was like, they were like, oh, we need you here, we need you there. There were always either Indigenous people performing or speaking there. You know, so I felt really privileged to be in such a great, amazing, powerful company. And really, like, I went to Paris, like, not knowing what I was going to find, and had no real expectations. And then, you know, I found these women, these indigenous women, who are like standing up and saying no. And whether that be these women in the Amazon who are like, no, you're not coming here. This is not happening. Or whether it's the ladies from the Arctic who, you know, are like, you know, not here, not now. And that really, it did something to me, because I kept looking, especially at the women from the Amazon, where I was like, wow, what if my grandmothers were able to say no? What if we were empowered and supported enough to at least stand up? Like, maybe they still would have done what they wanted to do, but if we were able to just say no. And that, you know, my grandmother was going to be 101 in April. And, you know, she remembers when the oil and gas companies came in. Those old ladies remember when, you know, their elders signed their X onto that paper and got, you know, what they got in return, and what we're still enduring to this day. And so I kept looking at them and just thinking, like, wow, you know, keep fighting. Like, this is all of our fight now. Because what I realized too, and like hearing the women in the Arctic story, was like, you know, there's this really incredible Allison Gordon. Yeah, Allison Gordon is this incredible artist, and performance artist. She's an amazing, amazing woman. And she was telling me stories of how, like, you know, she loves being in the cold, like 60 below is awesome, you know? And she's like, but it's not getting cold, you know? And just to make that connection of like, oh, well, our carbon extraction, production, and burning that's happening here in the Delta is also making your people, you know, have a change in life and having to adapt to that. You know, so I think that, you know, for me with that, like, yeah, just those personal connections that I made that helped, I know these things in theory, but to really like feel it and to touch them, was a whole other thing, and be so touched by them. So yeah, there is this Indigenous Women's Treaty that has been signed. The signing started in September of last year in New York, but there is legend of the condor and the eagle coming together. And so these women that I was so blessed to be with, specifically Neil Plant and Casey Camp, they were some of the original signers, as well as Sharif Houghton, who is part of our organizing crew for the March 23rd action, were original signers. And we had this action. So all of the other actions and demonstrations, but the Indigenous Environmental Network had petitioned to do this action of a canoe, flotilla canoe action down, not on the Seine, but Vicente de Lette, so just it's connected through a lock system. And so, on the morning of December the 6th, I picked up Moose Jackson and my collaborator Sharon Lanezo Hong, and we went straight from the airport to the Vicente de Lette. And then there was the small flotilla. Unfortunately, because of circumstances and because of the attacks, all of the canoes that were supposed to come weren't able to get to Paris. And the Sariaku, there's this really beautiful story of their community actually built a canoe and carved these beautiful bird carvings all along it that the whole entire community had come together to create together. And then they had to actually boat it all the way down to wherever the closest port was to then put it on a plane to then get to, put it on a ship and put it on a plane, and then it got caught up in customs. So it wasn't actually there for the dance. So everyone's in these kind of funny kayaks and nobody's comfortable in them. There are all these Lummi youth from the Northwest, and they were just like, we don't know what we're doing in this thing, So it was kind of interesting, but it was a really, really powerful moment. And before the action actually happened, we had this Indigenous Women's Treaty signing. And so the treaty is between women, Indigenous women right now. I think it will be opened up to women worldwide in the future. But this treaty being that we will defend and protect each other, our land, and Mother Earth. And that comes with a certain amount of responsibilities with direct action and prayer. And so yeah, that walked into it, and I'm still taking on those responsibilities, which is why I'm working on this direct action on the 23rd. So it's a little and then I think it's come up throughout the night. I keep hearing it, but sacredness and that spiritual connection, or whatever you want to call that. In running with the Indigenous Environmental Network, the ceremony was a huge foundation for every action that we did. Before the Notre Dame, procession to the Pont des Arts, there was ceremony that was happening, and there were people from the west, people from the north, people from the south. Actually, what was interesting is we're standing in front of the Notre Dame the morning of D12, and the sun's still kind of coming up, and the police roll up, and everyone's kind of in a circle, and we're having a ceremony, and he comes straight to me, and I'm not in charge, I was just, and he's like, what's going on here? I don't know. I'm not sure. And so they let kind of everybody do their thing until the Sami stepped up to sing their song and share their ceremony. And it just thought that it was kind of interesting, very fond love of American Indians. And so, that was definitely part of, or we were conscious of it. It wasn't like we were doing ceremony to have protests, but we were conscious of the fact that if you're able to say we are doing ceremony, then that is different than saying we are having a protest. And it also changed the whole dynamic of everyone's intentions, because the intentions were set. The smoke was cleared the air. Like we were all present. So we were also part of water ceremony as well. And it was super powerful. And so we have some of those folks that are hopefully gonna come down. And just to kind of go back to what I started with, and I'm trying to like think it out, right? Because I recognize I don't have all the answers, and I feel like I've learned so much and I'm still processing so much from the last couple of months, especially. But just how the doctrine of discovery is retarded, and we are all going along with it. We're 500 years of going along with it, and it has gotten us into this ridiculous mess. And it's time to just call it out. When we spoke at the Doctrine to Declaration workshop in DC, Brenda and I were like super nervous because we were in this room with all these really brilliant minds who were, breaking down what the doctrine was. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I know what the doctrine of discovery is. And you're like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Just how just disgusting it is. And so we were the last ones to present. And at the end, everyone was like, well, this is like genocide. Like what's happening to the people here on your coast is genocide. And what do you need? And we had heard, a lot of people presenting, and it was like, we need truth and reconciliation and healing, and that's really like what we need here. And we talked about that a lot when we were doing the Friday one, that everyone is so hurt, damaged, calloused, whatever you want to say, that we can't even talk about it, and if we can't talk about it, then we're surely not going to like move forward or have healing. So, that's, why I'm here, I guess, tonight. Thank you all for coming. It's really awesome. I just want to say that again. I just want to say that, and Anna, if you want to speak too about okay. So, on March 23rd, there is going to be an auction for 43 million acres of the deepest waters in the Gulf of Mexico to go to the highest bidder for oil and gas exploration. And we really felt that we just signed this agreement in Paris. Well, we all know the agreement was like, well, we kind of maybe think that if we can, we will do something or whatever. And that is another thing that I wanted to mention, going back to my experience with the Environmental Network and my kind of crash course education with them. But the rights of indigenous peoples was taken out of the binding text. And that's a huge thing because it's also human rights that, are that's human rights that is being taken out as well. So, that's just something that we should all be conscious of. And I think another thing that I didn't realize, maybe I should have, is that, corporations have basically hijacked the United Nations. And what does that mean for us as a global community if we allow this to continue? So, I'll just stop there. And, sorry, I wanted to say though, we all want you to be part of our action, and there's a lot of ways that people can participate. So we have a number of things scheduled in the days leading up to the action. The action is actually at early in the morning on the 23rd. So I think that they start the auction at 8 a.m. and we're hoping to surround the Superdome, that's a huge structure. And we are calling in people from nationally and regionally, and locally. We all know that it's easy to get people out to a festival or a parade or a cocktail party. But I'll play Mary's the morning. No, I'm kidding. All jokes aside, it's hard to get people out, and that's not really part of our culture. But I think that we're great at parading, and we're great at costuming, and we're great at being loud, and whatever that means to you, vocally or otherwise. encourage everyone to try to come out and to please spread the word, to please let people know that we're organizing this, that there are going to, like I said, there's going to be things leading up. We're hoping to have a water ceremony, a public water ceremony. So some of the original signers for the Indigenous Women's Treaty that will be here. Yeah, we would like to spend more time with you. So with that, I'm going to open up the room, and I think that, yeah, let's have a conversation. I can help facilitate. I guess I'll stand here so I can see everyone. So if anybody has questions, comments, ideas for March 23rd.
Can you talk about the Indigenous group that will be, people that will be coming?
The Indigenous Environmental Network?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
just so people didn't know.
yeah, so I got off the phone today with Dallas Bowl 2 from their media crew, which is really, they're amazing. So they're coming down, and we're hoping to, we're actually hoping to go to Homa and to have some sort of just transition workshop. I had this conversation with an elder in the Homa community. He called me yesterday, like out of the blue, and was like, "Hey, Monique, you know, I'm with you for the 23rd. He's like, you know, I work for the industry, and you know, I totally agree with like that we need to stop the insanity. But you know, what are we going to tell our people? You know, I know, we all know that so many of our people are directly employed from oil and gas, and if we're telling them, hey, we gotta, you know, put the brakes on the oil and gas business, then what are we directing them to? What is that real transition? So hopefully that workshop session that we'll have, and I think we're planning that for Monday, and also trying to get coastal communities to, you know, especially the Homa community, to come up. And there's also Penny Opal Plant, who is an amazing, strong woman who's been doing a lot of environmental justice work for a long time. She's based out in the Bay Area. And then Casey Camp, who, you know, led us in most of this. I'm hoping, you know, we talked about it today, and we're like, oh, we need Casey, you know, because she's just a force. And so hopefully she will be here as well. And possibly Candy, who was the only person who spoke in that field. So she lives up in North Dakota, is a cancer survivor, and just fearless, fierce, amazing woman. So hopefully, you know, the women are home. And we're looking to, I wanted to kind of put this out to you, Kathy, but I also did an email, but we're hoping to interconnect with the Black and Indian community here too, and to connect them, those women together. So that came up in conversation today. So, yeah.
Monique, do you know the movie The Louisiana Story?
I will guess. I've always wanted to do a double header with my Louisiana one.
But that population in the movie is a large segment today of South Louisiana.
Yeah.
And they've all been duped. It's propaganda. And when I go talk to them, it's the same story. How are we going to make a good living? They want money.
Right.
And I keep looking for answers.
Yeah.
All I can tell them is, you're dying. My 98-year-old aunt told me last time I was at home in Lake Charles, she doesn't speak French so much anymore because her friends are dead. Of course, at 98, it's about to happen. But I said, do you think it's because of the cancer from the chemical factories in Lake Charles, and they're going to build a new one in Lake Charles soon? We have to find a way of replacing that economy. We got rid of slavery. That was a big deal in New Orleans. We can find something else, but I came back from Paris with this belief that the rest of my life has got to be this, and I'm very moved by everything you've said and the involvement of the indigenous people. And then Marie-Francoise Grouch helped you around.
Thank God for her.
Yes.
I couldn't keep up. She was like 72, so
Yes.
trying to keep her. Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't know what that is though.
Well,
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott, tell us what it is.
yeah. Well, in Louisiana, my people are oil and gas people, right? I mean, my granddad's 95. He's still working for the industry. But I feel like across Louisiana, more of boat people for oil and gas. More of the people that make the boats, like Schwest and Bollinger and those kind of regional capitalists. We made in Homa that 300-foot drill ship that was going to go up to the Arctic until recently and drill up in there. That was made in Louisiana. We have all these fab yards. The first offshore wind is going to happen in the first offshore wind in the United States, as I understand it. I don't have all the knowledge, but that's happening in Rhode Island, off Rhode Island, and it's a company out of Metairie that's doing it, right? So, I mean, I do think there's, people have different visions for the energy future we're going to have or whatever. And I've seen a couple of them saying that in Louisiana, we could produce a lot of energy from wind offshore using the same kind of bulk culture that we have, same kind of skills. So again, it's not like that's everything, but there's already Louisiana companies that are moving to clean power. It's hard to talk about, right? Especially in Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche Parish. I think the clean energy groups in Terrebonne Parish, the clean energy group in Terrebonne Parish is called Terrebonne Parish Advocates for Possibility. Right? They have to like talk around it because they don't want to be confronted by all that pressure. I do think in Louisiana we have to confront that we are an island nation inside of the United States, right? New Orleans is a little island. We're a community of all these little islands. If carbon doesn't go down, if it goes over 1.5, we're facing some bigger seas. So we have to.
Literally an island.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an island now. I mean, you drive over the bridge to get there. To get out when the storm comes, we have to go over the water. And as an environmental advocate, I work for Gulf Restoration Network, preserving the land, trying to fight the same fights Clarice started 30 years ago, trying to get oil companies to repair the land that they're supposed to by law, that now our flood authority has sued them to repair the land. Different parishes, like Cameron Parish, has sued the companies to repair the land. Not to dismiss the value of our land, because that land is what shelters us from the storm. And that's what we have in the face of climate change that New York doesn't have, that Miami doesn't have. We have that wetland. And it's been so damaged by the industry. And the thing is, they've known, right? They've known for years. Hashtag Shell knew, right? In the 70s, when these laws that Cameron Parish was meeting about today were passed, the industry, the American Petroleum Institute, got together and said, well, it's going to cost us, I think, I remember them, $34 billion to repair coastal lands across the United States if the United States moves forward with this Coastal Land Act. So that's the negative side. But on the plus side, we can mitigate that cost to us, the oil industry, through congressional actions and regulatory actions. Basically, around 1980, when I was born, the industry was contemplating purchasing governments in order to stave off enforcement of that law. So we've had 36 years where the industry is held back. So it is strange. We are this place that's under incredible duress, incredible pressure. But when we fight, we can win and win really larger. The fight to hold the land, these companies are paying attention to it, and I think the action on the 23rd about the leases in the Gulf is the same way. I don't think something like this has ever happened where people have so openly dissented against the activity it's so, it's like the steel industry in Pittsburgh, or it's supposed to be so beneficial for all of us in Louisiana, this industry that a lot of us have benefited from. But I do think when we come together on the 23rd and talk about how it's killing us, talk about how it's limiting our future, I do think it'll echo around the world.
How has the drop in prices affected, will that affect the lease sale, the drop in oil prices? I'm just wondering, do you know who's going to be turning up, and the dynamics of that, how they change?
That's a good question.
From what I understand, like, that's a 10-year out projection. Like, they're not gonna start doing.
Okay, right, so
that's, this is like, they're just banking it for now.
Right.
I might be wrong.
Yeah, well, and the way that they're thinking of the oil price now is they're thinking that this is a temporary downturn, right? I mean, I think people who are from this part of the world know that we've had booms and busts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no question the oil industry is seeing this as simply another bust from which we will recover. And I think that's one of our jobs in general, and on March 23rd, is to make the point that increasingly it's going to be a bust. And why should our economy and our life be tied to a vessel that is sinking?
I think that this gentleman, you guys, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I guess to some extent on the hummingbird too, I think we all need to kind of do what we can. You read in the paper, we read in the paper about this lawsuit against the oil companies that have spent decades just literally raping the land in Louisiana and getting away with it. And it's going back and forth. In today's paper, there was an article saying that a federal judge is going to decide whether or not to kill it or send it back to the state. I think we all need to kind of like pay attention to it and show some kind of support for it, so that the people that are fighting it don't feel like they're just wasting their time, but that there is a public support for it. I don't exactly know. I don't have any direct knowledge on what should be done, but I think the first thing we all need to do is become educated about it, and then after that we need to write letters to the editor, write, maybe even write the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic and say, how can I get involved? And maybe we need to have an action in support of this, because right now it's just it's like page 23, non-news as far as the mainstream media is concerned. And it's a really, really important thing. If you use BP as kind of a model for financing the things you all are talking about, if this lawsuit gets won, there should be a bunch of money there, part of which should go towards finding out from indigenous people, how are you going to fix this thing?
What's the timeline on that?
On what? On the lawsuit?
Right, because I thought that
Tomorrow it could be dead, or it could be still be alive in state court, which is where it was initially filed, and the defendants did a smart little thing trying to get it removed to federal court, and I can't tell you what the timeline is, but maybe we all need to kind of just learn more about it and find out what we can do. And if we are coherent amongst ourselves, we can maybe let each other know, okay, this is what's going on. This is a pivotal point where we need to do something.
So the timeline, the lawsuit was dismissed by the federal judge in district court, but the attorneys appealed it. And yesterday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal began to hear the appeal. And their ruling likely won't be for months, but the lawsuit is still very much alive in that it hasn't, really been buried yet.
That's news to me.
Yeah, but even the media has gotten it wrong. As soon as the state legislature passed a retroactive law that was supposedly going to kill the lawsuit, the media in the headline said that the lawsuit was killed, but that wasn't factually true. So yeah, it is alive, and I was talking to one of the attorneys just the other day, and they feel pretty good. That even though the circuit is very conservative, that they've got a really good case, and that they have a chance of winning this on appeal. So then it would go back to the state court, and so that would be huge.
And all these other parishes have sued also, so they sort of uncork the bottle of that suit.
Yeah, and at any time, the governor could just tell the Department of Natural Resources, I mean, in theory, to enforce the law. And that would kind of make these suits moot because the same action would be taken by the executive branch of government instead of the judicial branch.
So if we're talking about March 23rd, right?
Mhm.
That's a great date to work around and compile like a list of demands, right? Like what are our collective demands, or what do we want to draw attention to at that moment if we're doing this major, direct action, encircling the site where, this massive auction is going to occur. I have a few questions about that in terms of like, the logistics and how, far people are planning to go and willing to go with that action, but also just, as we're out there and we, and media attention is being, levied on this action, like what are our demands, what are we coming together, like what is the platform that we're sort of coming together behind? So some things like Edwards, the Governor Edwards actually, enforcing the law could be a great demand. Just drawing attention, like celebrating the fact that this lawsuit actually lives because I thought that it was done, months ago. And, I think that it's, when we talk about, like a just transition and none of us have the answers for it, of course, because we're like not like policy experts, I can't speak for all of us, but I sure as hell am not. Like I have an idea of like, how we might be able to, vaguely use renewable energy research and engineering and all of these skills and funnel the oil industry into the renewable industry, but that's not my expertise. But there are people who do have that expertise, who need to get funding in order to do that study. So since we love master plans so much, in southeastern Louisiana, why isn't there a just transition master plan, right? So that could be a demand that we say, yo, Edwards, or yo, future President Bernie Sanders, like fund this plan. You're welcome.
Well, determining what your demands are is one important thing to do, but there's other things also that I've been involved in actions before, and the nuts and bolts, just getting to the nuts and bolts of this, you probably have to have some kind of monitors determined so that people there are being told what to do and what not to do. Maybe you even need to have, and I've done these before and I'm willing to help, but you need to have some kind of a training seminar. People are going to actually be involved in civil disobedience. So they know some of the nuts and bolts of civil disobedience. And, the world's changed about civil disobedience. Many years ago, you had a right to be on a sidewalk. Now the world is like, well, we can determine that you have this is the free speech area, it's over 3 miles back there. But anyway, I think if you're expecting to have thousands of people, you really need to have an idea of how you're going to deal with the nuts and bolts of it.
If y'all notice on the flyer, which we encourage y'all to take many of, at the very bottom it says text Superdome to 88202. So if y'all would do that, then that's an easy way for me to take those nuts and bolts.
But then also, I was really touched by the way you talked about how these corporations are trying to paint their image. and then thinking about Shell and New Orleans, like everything, there was even a tree planting recently that Shell was sponsoring. So it's really, and it's sitting there right in the center of the city, and it has this building. There's nothing about that building except for the word Shell that will let you know like what's going on there. And I always am kind of wondering like, why, like there's big parks around there. And I'm thinking also about Occupy, how they started with posters. If you could sort of just surreptitiously start putting posters up on the trees, somehow like subtly slaying Shell, but also, you know, like advocating, just like secret pop-up things around the city. It'd be a really cool way. Yeah, I feel like it needs to.
I know a screen printer who wants to start producing like buku posters for free for, you know, movements in New Orleans. So like, we definitely, Meg Turner, who's like one of the founders of Community and stuff. So like, we should totally like draw her in if we want to do some outreach, you know, graphic outreach for this.
That'd be awesome. And again, people don't know, like once people do know, it's like, yeah, we don't need the solution, but you can just, by doing it, you inspire, you know, like the second grader to be like, wow, I want to think about this more, and it has these chain effects.
One year we made fans that we handed out to people going into Jazz Fest, you know, that talk about Shell's pollution and how funny they were. And one of them, somebody on the gospel stage fainted, and they were brought back to you know, being fans. So that was a great way to do it. So if your screen printer friend is up for it, you screen print on paper, I don't know. Yeah. But people love a fan, you know, who will like give you a nasty face if you're trying to fly.
I want to just to one of my observation in doing actions in the city thus far is that we know how to do parades, we don't like protests so much. So anything that utilizes the culture that is already here, of celebration, New Orleans people know how to do that. You know how to put a smile on your face, you know how to make your feet move. That's what makes people show up to things. So if you're interested in planning on, if you're starting to think about planning something, just make sure that you keep it fun. We can do that, and we can bring out a lot more numbers out of it.
Maybe we should all wear costumes.
We already have the skills for it. You know, it's really easy to get people behind it. You know, things that you can turn things into parades and protests. My first experience with that was when I first came here. I got involved in Critical Mass, which is a bicycle protest. And in the first two critical masses that I attended, cyclists got hit by cars trying to drive through. And even though we're not supposed to have a leadership in that group, I got together with a few other people, and all we did is we made a route map for people so that they knew the direction we were going to go, gave the explanation of the notion of a super group, which is to stay together and make sure there's not large breaks in groups if cars won't decide to do that. And we went to the extent of turning the protest into a parade by decorating our bicycles and showing the costume. We quadrupled the numbers that first month. Not only did people not try to run us over, and honk at us the whole way, but they enjoyed it. Cars rode behind us and they were like, hey, it's cool, it's a bicycle parade. People ran alongside of us. There were people like standing up on their porches and cheering us. It changed it was like, okay, that makes sense. Go with this. This is already.
Can you, sorry, I know, but just because you didn't really talk about Paris at all, well, you have the floor. A few Americans.
Can I give you a two in a poem?
Yes. And then it's Kevin's turn.
All right.
Sorry.
1 second, sorry.
While he's finding his poem, I'm just gonna give a spot there is an art build that is happening at 1340 Montague, which is not very far from here, the RAHC warehouse. And this is going to be happening on Saturday, March the 12th, and Sunday, March the 13th. And so Joisha, who many of you may know, she's part of the Future Coalition, as well as Ann Meredith, are working to facilitate this art build. And there'll be more going on. But if you want to stay connected, the nonewleases.org is a great site too.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there's several people in this room that are very involved in organizing and planning this action and the days leading up. So rest assured, a lot of the questions that have been brought up here we've got people that have been doing direct actions at resales around the country that are supporting us, and we've been working around the clock. We're on several conference calls a day. But anybody that wants to get involved and help us organize this, it's really easy to plug in. Just contact one of us, and we'll get you in the right working group. We've got different working groups. We've got the art build working group. We've got
You'll be voluntold too.
programming working group. The communications. There's a tremendous amount of work that's going on right now that you're not hearing about, but we could use more support. We definitely need people to step up right now. So all hands on deck. The more people participate in helping us plan and organize, the stronger the event's going to be.
Can we hear more about what you said we could hear more about?
You
were like, there's all this stuff happening, like, that you can hear more about. Like, I just would like more information, like, what is gonna happen on March 23rd? Like, what is it gonna look like? Where are places, like, you're saying it's an arrestable action, like, where, are there opportunities for people to ask?
Yes, so the plan is for you and 100 friends each to show up at the Superdome at 7 a.m., which is, this posters don't have a number, this is an early incarnation. So, you might just handwrite on it if you give it to other people. To meet there at 7 a.m. and then we'll go up the ramps around the Superdome, and then there's a civil disobedience component that will go into the dome as far as we can. Details are being worked out on that. Just one of the dynamics is that this is open to the public. It's an auction of public lands, and so it's being managed by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And so in one sense, they don't actually have cause to keep people out. On the other, I've been to these leases before, and the Superdome security are actually the heavies here. I mean, Rivera knows this. And so they'll likely try to throw us out. So one supporter is Bill Quigley from the Loyola Peace and Justice Center, and he's helping us to figure out some of these legal issues. And it seems as if one of the places we're coming to is simply not to, the whole don't ask permission thing, and just go in on the day of. So there's also a Facebook page if you just type in New Lease on Life. We're talking about this in a positive way as we talk about. You can, message the group, or I think there's an info on the No News Leases, or come talk to me or Monique or Jonathan. That answers the question.
So the auction is happening at the
Yeah, it's strange.
That's not
It's
really-
weird. It happens at the Superdome. Yeah.
So I guess my question is, you're calling for an end of new drilling and new leases as their auction at the time of the auction.
Yes.
But that seems like it's already too late.
It's a good point. It is a little too late.
What can be done? You know what I mean? I think it seems a little futile at that point, so I don't mean to be negative.
No, it's a good point.
What are the things that people can do so
Yes.
that it is productive?
So a couple of answers to that. One is that this action is really part of larger movements, all over the country and all over the world, one of which is Keep It in the Ground. And that movement has had a real success for example, if y'all pay attention to Obama saying you couldn't pull coal out of public lands anymore. And so this action is the first, really the launch of a campaign to call for no new drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. And so while we cannot, the bids were placed, months ago actually, we can't stop the actual awarding of the leases on that day. This is drilling that is going to happen in the future, and so we want to monkey wrench the drilling that will actually happen because of these leases. So I don't know what the blueprint for that is, but it's I think the parallel is, several years ago the call was made to not get coal on public lands, right? So although they're bidding and will win some leases on this day, the campaign will be built around not having them drill on this new land, if that makes sense. The other thing that is very important in this part of the world is that although lots of us have really been doing this almost all our adult lives, working on this issue. Certainly, oil and gas is creaming us, right? I mean, I think our work is very important, but you know, they kind of win. And so this action is very important in that we do aspire to get a lot of people there. Hopefully the biggest action, you know, that I've ever seen in this part of the world. And to the extent that we're part of this larger national Keep It in the Ground and other movements and the indigenous movement, I think it puts us on the map and says, wow, even, you know, Louisiana, where oil and gas runs everything, even there's a movement, a real heartbeat. So that public statement that is ferocious and much larger than anything we've done before is really important. It's kind of like when marriage equality went to Iowa, you kind of sat up and took notice. It's the same thing here. Wow, we're really striking deep in the heart of where oil is.
Well, just to push back on saying that we can't stop this leasing, like this auction.
Yeah, there's a direct action component for sure. Yes, there is. Okay. But let me say this, that the bid, what we don't know, and there's some Greenpeace woman named Christina Flores is looking into this. What we don't know is if they've placed the bids, they're really just announcing them. And so if we prevent the announcing of those bids, does that, I mean, it must have some legal ramification, because then why would they be doing it? So a lot depends on our ability to get into that supernova.
Okay.
So that's a very
Sorry, I just want to make sure that, because Kevin's been in the queue for a while, and we got moves lined up for a co, so I just want to make sure that, yeah.
2 cents left.
Okay.
No,
2 cents in a help.
A couple of observations, one of which is nowadays papers like NOLA papers, online papers like NOLA.com, et cetera, work off of analytics. So if you want the environment on the front page, then you have to have a lot of hits on those articles, and you have to urge people to do it, and then write in, and then all the other kind of thing. The other thing, observation, is in dealing with the environment and talking to some people who had gone to COP21 as well. The commons is a concept that should come up, is a little ill-defined. And when you talk about just transitions, you tend to think, oh, well, transition to where? And I'm thinking, oh, transition to the past. Because before we had European possession deeds to land, we had peoples who worked at the commons. So I just, did it come up in Paris, or is there, and if so, whether or not you can stop leases or not, to try to have a paradigm shift to what do we all commonly have when you think about, oh, they just redefined the boundaries and now they're leasing. You used to not, who says we can lease that stuff, that land, you know? It's a commons. And that's the same thing with Point of La Hash, same thing with the single aquifer under the Florida parishes that Ellis wants to frack. They have one mistake that ruins Denham Springs, Avita Springs, Kentwood, all those springs are one aquifer. So to me, the commons is a concept that applies, and it may help the general public in paradigm shift. Small observation.
Small.
Okay, I'm going to speak to just a little bit more than just the poem. Because my experience in Paris was really astounding. That when we first arrived, as soon as I got off the plane, the first thing that I saw was a group of women in a circle, saging and sharing a pipe and signing this treaty, while the men stood around that exterior of the circle and held space for them and protected them. And I thought that was a really important symbol for the time that we're in right now. I also agree with Imani, and it's the first time I've heard anyone say the kinds of things that I've been thinking for years, is that the real issue here has to do with a culture. All of our collective actions together over a period of time forms a culture. It's as simple as that. And so our laws, which are they're really just fictions that we agreed to sometimes we don't agree to, but we're coerced to go along with it. But ultimately, we can change our culture. And many of us in this room are culture workers in the arts and in other ways. I mean, all of us are creating this culture. So those are the things that I think are fundamental for us to keep in mind as we work within systems or try to oppose those systems, that ultimately our actions, our words, our ideas are forming a culture collectively in vivo, right in the moment. And I think it's really important that we not put all of our eggs in one basket for just this action that's coming up, but building the culture for the action before it gets there, and also supporting that culture after the action to keep it going. Because what we do need, I feel like, is a body of people who consider it something that they do as part of their culture, to show up for things like this, to stand up for the things that matter. That's not really been part of the Louisiana culture that I've seen so far, and I'd love to see that happen. I was really, really sad after the oil spill when we tried to have a rally in the border. It was really deplorable and sad, and I think that we could do a lot better. So this is my impression from Paris. First openings carrying this message back into the dragon's belly, though it has cost us a home, a blood relation, our dignity, our way of life. There are some wisdoms so basic, so simple, they are beyond the touch of language, of race or creed or generations. All the long-wind sorcerers who burned us with charters and deals, with promises and words of war, with laws and threats and manipulation, they cannot obliterate the sacred treaties, which are always waiting just under the skin. Every time the lights go out, it surfaces. This way we all know of being a tribe, of mutual aid. What's it cost to keep the illusion going? The legs are coming out from under that horse, and this fire we are building will roast its meat. We have traveled across the great salt sea, finally, just as you are finding out that what you need these many years your fathers have warred against. This too is the cycle of human learning and suffering. Always we try to bring this meaning. Always there are ones who cry out in belligerence, intimidated by the truth. When you've done wrong and you know it, it is easier to harden your heart than to be a man, accept the shame, apologize and heal. So we make a circle around the gentle ones. It is time for their voices to make counsel with the silent mother, to burn cedar and sage, sweet grass and palo santo, to hammer on the skins, call the spirits, to call our warriors across the water, mark our flags and banners for Turtle Island. We have all known this day was coming. They come to stand for the silent nations. They paddle hard into the wind. They ride on glorious storms, and their numbers are fast growing. You heed this warning. The time has come when we can no longer negotiate, no longer back down. We have nothing left to lose. Stand with us this day. Turn and face the dragon. A reckoning is underway.
Guys, I just want to say we are at 8 o'clock. This has been awesome, but we can keep the conversation going. I just want to respect if people, gotta go, gotta move, but let's keep the conversation going.
If anybody wants a Bernie bumper sticker.
Or a Bernie brochure.
Yeah, you're the source.
I've got one.